then then I
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this invitation and for being on the other side listening to me. I would like to share about my project. My project that I love the most, that teaches me the most, is the Feminist Art School, and I'm going to share some through a PowerPoint. The school started through a residency in San Francisco. And I thought as important to share this project when you were talking about artificial intelligence, sharing the importance to me to have a feminist education, especially in the arts, especially during these times of furthering artificial intelligence, because for me, it's wrongly called intelligence. It is programs to recognize patterns. And behind that recognition of archives and data, this artificial intelligence has to be fed by instructions, by moderators, by people who work by the pennies, who are overexploited, and also thinking that it's people from like the Philippines to Colombia, mostly women, mostly vulnerable people in terms of social and economic ways. So I find it interesting to reclaim this fact of feminism in art schools when artificial intelligence tries to kind of regain or take over imagination and collective understanding in some way. But imagination is essential for people, for feminism, so we can imagine different ways to live. It's essential to seek these outlets to survive capitalism. And I'm gonna read a little bit about a manifest that began in the school. It's its ninth edition this year. It's in the Modern Art Museum in Medellin. And this manifest, I have built it based within the different editions based on ideas that have allowed us to explain the school a little bit better in its ideology. The school has to be open and free because arts education should be for all those interested, never private, never elitist. It's a human right. That is how this project is born, as I was sharing in San Francisco, mainly as a critique to the United States model. The school is for all ages, bodies, experiences, to break with one of the most common tradition of institutions and schools. We must break with the division of ages. School is from preschool and university. And in preschool, we are told to learn through play. Are taken care of. We have colorful spaces, interactive spaces, more childlike associations. But once we continue going through this education cycle divided by ages, we lose that space of kindness, of participation, of care, to the point that many of us know if we reach a university, college level, campus spaces also become spaces that can be even unsafe for women, for the dissidencies in terms of sexual abuse. These pictures that I'm sharing here are in San Francisco. I wanted to show this part about kindness that is present in preschool of colors. I'll continue with the manifest. Genders are to play and should never limit us. At first, schools use genders as a starting point, as an excuse. So every collaborator or participant uses this excuse to talk about different topics, topics that we usually don't find in art schools, like critical thinking, feminist thinking, and even science fiction. What's important for me to use the genders as a play is to break with the parameters, the mainstream parameters that write or define male artist figures as like geniuses. And we limit that because geniuses in art don't exist. We are all teachers of all genders and we're all learners at the same time. In the feminist school, we will not be referring to cis white men as geniuses of art as a way to search for new people to look up to, for new voices. And that is also something that this project in Wikipedia and Wikimedia are trying to regain. And I think it's an obligation for all the teachers to find different people to look up to, just like as an obligation to do work that goes beyond what is comfortable and repeating those same names. And those same names are repeated in thousands of books. There's an additional activity that I think it's educational, it's part of the educational depth of rewriting history. My project is based on Anna Eisenberg's project. She's an Argentinian artist that um, has guided through her methodology, but the school in itself does not have a specific methodology. For me, it's important to think about a feminist school, not a feminist piece of art, a school that has a method, a disposition, instead of thinking of a painting, feminist painting as a closed style or category. Another point is that the school must have a colorful space and environment. The goal of the colors started as a critique to the white cube, but also seeks for the school to be a space of joy, of warmth, a little bit against this neutrality beige trend in design, but also going against studied cases like in the United States is called school to prison pipeline, how schools even look like or use the same kind of furniture and design as many prisons or jails. Schools want cooperation, not competition, because many schools, especially universities, art universities in the United States have this model that you're going to leave with a project and style of branding that is going to be your art, and your colleagues, artists are competition that you have to be over a space in the gallery or in art. And art is not a career that seeks an award or a battle that seeks a truth. For me, it's a never-ending process of learning and construction. The competition to be the first or the best is a formula for depression. If you join an art career with that goal, you're gonna have a terrible time. It's going to be a traumatizing experience. The school should not feed this idea that the artist who suffers becomes a genius. Art school should be a safe space. And here there's a furry in the in Buenos Aires version. We started including furries as these anthropological, fantastic characters. I don't know how my time is going. It's interesting that in school, in the Buenos Aires version, Archivo de una Memoria Trans or Archive of a Trans Memory participated, and it was really interesting. And you can visit minoliti.com.r. You can see the link from Feminist School of Painting. And there's a blog where you can find all the videos of the classes in Spanish that we had in the museum in Buenos Aires. And you can access to enjoy the amazing collaborations. This one, for example, was a class by Lucia Reisi, who first started a conversation about painting and gender and the representation of the domestic work kind of represents the all the domestic work that is not paid, and that is one of the most essential feminist fights to recognize work that is not paid for. And in all painting classes, there's a theory part and a practical part. And instead of using paint, we used cleaning products. And instead of using white paper, we use this orange fabric that are used to clean rooms or homes. This was another class by Leila Younes, a trans artist, and it was related to the drag world. And her class, starting from this idea of portrait, was to work at the end with makeup instead of more traditional paint. I also like to have a small libraries in the schools or places to read. And these places to read are created by different magazines, fanzines, books. This was a class with Identidad Marrón or Brown Identity, that it's a collective that fights against institutional racism in Argentina, especially in communications or television, visual arts. And here they also use, instead of using white canvases, they use brown boxes that have symbolism in Argentina based starting from 2001. This was the school Newcastle at the end of a bigger installation, also with spaces to read. This was in France. And a little bit, I'll come back to the manifest because these schools are against schools in some way because they search to switch the paradigm of quality. We think of the art piece as a capitalist perspective, and instead in schools we should have tools for critical thinking more than building this masterpiece. In the United States, especially, I came across a lot of experiences from friends and people that I know of these traumatizing moments in art schools where what could have been as critical thinking, it was more finding formulas to find your specific style or branding that could be commercialized.
We have to think that paint will always be a tool from handmade signs and protests to paintings that our aunts, you know, make with tablecloths and flowers. All of the political art has been, being used. And another piece that we speak with the collaborators in the class. I was speaking with Alice Alcácer that before her classes and conferences, she asked people in the auditorium to find a comfortable space before beginning the conference. She recognizes the diversity and different needs of access of each different body. And that's good that we bring that into the space because we can break with those dynamics of teacher and student. We invite participants to move, to use, and reclaim the space. Um, More so moving beyond being a student and also incentivize the use of public spaces. Thank you so much. And just one last tip and a really important piece of this piece is to talk about what are the possibilities of the school being able to create community. And in general, arts, gets us this from this individual level and brings us to the workshop and the classrooms level. And it's an opportunity for people once they're moving, once they're sharing, they're building bonds, especially in this era of loneliness and hyper individuality during or under the conditions of capitalism. These classes are a way to form community and form friendships. As professors and coordinators, we must incentivize connections with participants, invite them to move, to ask questions, to observe, not to compare or to compete, but to establish bonds amongst each other. And even though it's hard to speak with strangers or share what we're doing, I think that the images can be bridges of communication. And a tip that I take from my teacher is this piece around connecting with other people who are also makers before statements or before even having to talk about what we know about art. I think it's great. And what Diana said, method says is to use questions as tools that open up for dialogue because I think, we want the question to open up the space so that the other person can share their opinion or their story. And I'll stick with that as a tip for you all to take into account and move forward with community. Thank you so much.
School is a place of which I would like to call Maria dos Anjos, and I thank you so much to be here with us. Hola, hello, you all. My name is Anna Raylander. Thank you so much for the space. I'd like to thank everybody for the invitation. I'm happy to be part of this meeting. It's a great start of a year. First, I would like to take the space. We have a short time here. I would like to share the sole project that I had with you. It would be my last exposition, solo exposition, and then after that we keep talking. The work I have been that I would like to discuss with you, present, it's called Mineiro Museum Session Room. It's a project that was made in the city of Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, state of Brazil. And since since its first trial to starting the project to get done by the institution, it took 8 years. So my first proposal was sent to this museum 2016. Just in 24, we actually got the project around the world and present the proposal. This is extremely important to say because it's a location geopolitical when you're thinking about things of times when you don't thinking about the time of work, but when behind modes of negotiation, there's a difficulty to get some projects going on. So we'll have to review structures that are colonial. It reveals bureaucratic process that engender racism, transphobia, machismo. So I think that's the data of this work, and you're gonna understand why. So it also has to do with insistence, executing or tried several times, negotiated, renegotiated, change it again, send proposal. It's part of my mode of acting and my way of to deal with art, the work of art. It's beyond it's beyond a work, real work. It goes beyond all of this. So this project, Miller Museum, sections, rooms, it's about the construction of the city of Belo Horizonte, it was the first planned capital in the country. It was built in a turn from the 19th century to the 20th century. Prior to the construction, the capital of Belo Horizonte, there was another capital called Ouro Preto, also in Minas Gerais, state of Minas Gerais. The city of Ouro Preto, it's very linked to the process of exploration, colonial exploration in Brazil. So even related to slavery, also in the process of mining and expropriation of the land. So there was centuries of exploration in this region. At the end of the 19th century, there was an assembly, a process, complex process of transition from a capital to another capital. So Ouro Preto is no longer capital, and then it moves to the state start planning Belo Horizonte. So it planned the city. It was elected territory without considering the population that were there, especially in this space, prior to the construction of the new capital. In the space where the city of Belo Horizonte stands right now, there was a community called some region, Curral del Rei. There was Afro-Indigenous space, the majority, and they were disappropriated. They were taken out of this land. That was their motto. The motto of my research is to understand this violent process of building that happened in Belo Horizonte in this turn of the century, based on historical images that exist in this museum that I was working with, the Museu Mineiro. This museum predominantly narrated by male, white, cultural elite from Minas Gerais. The city of Belo Horizonte was built as a model. Yeah, they focus on the model of Paris. Architecturally speaking, there was very neoclassical motifs. The architecture is similar to the avenues that we know today, the city of Paris. They try to enable that. One of the spaces that was planned, that was the highest place of the city at that time. That was called, today is called Praça da Liberdade, Freedom Mall. The Praça da Liberdade, Freedom Mall. For in order to build that, they put down a lot of houses of poor people that were living there. They just tear it all down, and they were called Marias Papudas, the women that used to live there. They were black, Afro-Indigenous people. They were living there, and the precarious way they were living, or the diets they missed. They had emotional illness, the inflammation in this region of the thyroid, because they miss yoga. They were stigmatized at the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century. So at the same time that the city was being built, because they were disappropriated from the houses, and some of them were Republican city. They were on the streets, homeless. This story is a mixture of myth and reality. Also, but a reason, very current myth in Brazil is a lack of narratives or records that we don't have in Brazil about the people that are racialized. So I also see that as the construction of this mythology of the transformation of women. They're real. They lived. They were in our plan, in as myths, as ghosts, but they're part of a project where narratives, dissidents, racialized, they were not told. I told all the story to you because the stories of those racialized women was lost. Were lost in the history, in our local history as well, in the state of Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, in Brazil. But there's another story was turning to official. There's turned by a painting. Belmiro de Almeida, painter, was officialized, where he represents a white woman crying. This white woman crying. She's she's blonde hair. She's like leaning in the chair, and her hands. She's holding her head in a position of crying. The scenery is in a room in France, and the floor of this place, in a carpet, there's a letter with a black, like there was like some mourning that happened. That somebody died in this letter. It was done in the end of the 19th century in Paris, and the artist brought this painting to Ouro Preto and shown. And the year that Ouro Preto is no longer the capital. So the new capital, Belo Horizonte, buy this painting and take to Belo Horizonte, to to this Praça da Liberdade, where these racialized women lost their houses to pallets, SEDs, headquarters of government. So this painting was there for a long time, and it was accountable, and they talk this they saw these people as like it's something bad. They didn't like that, so this painting is taken out from the Freedom Palace, Palácio da Liberdade, and it's not located anywhere. She was not located for long until the 20th century. It shows up at the Museu Mineiro. So in my research, I did all this path songs from the bad news that she got in the letter and linked with the history of the women, the racialized women, and I tried to map my own experience of living in the city of Belo Horizonte. So my proposal of work is within the museum was to remove from the Sala de Sessões session room that seals and keeps this first construction of the capital, this Belo Horizonte, this room full of motifs, neoclassical French, and I removed 24 works from this room that were permanent work that were there, and I take them out of there, and then I take to the technical part of the museum, and the only work that is there is the bad news. The Belmiro de Almeida is this that's still there. However, then we have an image of the removal. We do the removal of books without taking out the tags, without taking out the marks, the time, the screws. We leave there. We leave there. So, and the bad news is that no, the painting, man, bad news. There's another image here. Yeah, the bad news is presented backwards. No, from the back. It's shown like in a way of like it's a furniture. So the public cannot have access. They cannot have access. They cannot have access to the painting. They have access just towards the back of the painting. This work, this process was extremely complex. Not for a technical part, but for the flexibility and for difficulty of the city. I would say the city that didn't want to look at the past of the history and review its past. So every work that we do with the institutional critic that deals with this removal of the curtains and reveal what's hidden inside the institutions ends up generating a several effects within the own structure of the museum. And with this work, it was not different. In order to do this work, the institution had to be willing to review the relationship with her past, with the institution. The institution had to be willing to look at the narratives of the women, the narrative, and which narratives and what feminine bodies could be vocalized in the institution. So the institution had to look to its racist past, racial past, as one that are the heritage of the city and be available and be open to do a work that goes beyond just traditional exposition. They had to go beyond that. The highest challenge was that it has to do with the classical and traditional museum. That was tough to deal with this, especially dealing with paintings with 18th, 19th century, 20th century, and they don't have any tradition in contemporary art. So my reason, my desire to bring this work to discuss to you, to present to you, is because this project is part of several other projects that I'm working with, and I try to understand how the idea, how to make the images to rest, to remove images, and move out beyond a process of addition. I'm proposing a project of subtraction or resting. This kind of work operates in a different logic, which is to make us question if we need more images about the trauma, images of our past or violent past, and I'm trying to deal with our emptiness, with our gaps, our idea of suspension, our idea of narratives that were erased. They have to scare us, but not for the presence, but because of the absence. Remember the absence of these narratives. Maybe we could reimagine, repense, rethink the past. This work also helps us to think several times. Art exposition is like a shield, institutional shield, another process, metabolic process that could restructure the institution. This work is 80 years working in this process with the institution. It was the time the institution took to the time of the institution tried to review their own objectives and face that some effect or transformation was needed to be done there. So that was the right moment to do that. And to 2016, the institution was not prepared to handle that. Just in 24 they did it. So I would like to thank for you all listening to this. Thank you so much. And I thank you so much. Excellent work. I have a lot of comments to do, and especially anti-school, now anti-museum in your work. I know your work. Even when you show the institution, the structure of the institutions as they are. We're going to comment on this later. I would be happy to call Maria the line to talk to us, especially this great talk that we're having right now. Maria, are you here?
How long is the time that I have? Is it 8 minutes, 6 minutes? I'm going to switch into Spanish. Thank you. Well, the images are searched for. I can talk a little slower so the translation into Portuguese can be correct. Thank you so much. My name is Belén Correa. I am founder and director of the Archive for Trans Memory in Argentina. One of the expositions I have is I work from exile due to my personal story of persecution in my country. When I started in 93, I have political exile from the United States. I live in Germany nowadays, and from this point of being outside, I created an archive, and in activist groups today, we work towards the future. The archives, we work from today to the past. So we started finding in the activist space that is working in Argentina, and me from this historical law in 2012, the gender identity law happened, and there's less persecution, and now the law passed for inclusion in Argentina, where human rights and the defense for identity is so important in us as trans women and men. We were able to achieve identity since 2012. From that point on, activism in Argentina changed from today, 2012 to the future, and I was thinking 2012 to the past, everything that we went through to achieve that law to be passed. And from this historical moment, the law of gender identity, I had my friend who passed away, and she had the custom of taking a lot of pictures to our friends, and this was what began this archive. Throughout time, we're thinking 2012. Throughout time, we learned that the box has 6,000 images. It had letters, negatives, postcards, pictures, hotel receipts, different textiles, everything that analogy can allow for, and a travesti woman can have as her memory. We're talking about trans community as family, in which when one of us dies, we weren't getting her TVs and her valuables. Usually the families would do that, especially if they're like during the a funeral and such, but images, pictures are the first things that the families destroy because they destroy the testimony of what that person of their family went through. So us as daughters or aunties, nieces of our families, what we usually receive is those pictures. Their best wig, their best shoes, or her best dress. Those are parts of our heritage as a trans family. From that, we start recollecting documentation that nowadays we have more than 29,000 documents, letters, journals, newsletters from 1935 until 2000. And we say until 2000 because that is when we finalize this time of logics, 2000, 2001. We have a digital era where the pictures begins to be on the phone or digital cameras, and we lose that process of revealing the negatives and pictures. Who knows more about photography, that analogic pictures became like throughout time, it started going through composition, that kinds of images. So part of our work we do um, is to clean, process these products, the negatives, so that we can conserve them throughout time. Can we see the video? Because we started with it and then it ended. Sorry. Is it possible to look at the video again? Because I could see it for a second and
Yes,
thank you.
one moment, please. We're getting it back.
And in the archives, I can talk about it, but looking at those images it adds so much. That's why I like to see it. The process that we've had has changed a lot because from the very beginning we started recollecting these images, but without having an archival training. So the first training that we were able to access was through it's a memorial. Iber Memoria, they are two finance institutions for archives. And thanks to them, we were able to reach our first trainings in archival work. And we were able to understand the composition, the dirt, everything that was part of the archives. But we started through the Mexican norms. That's how we begin. And through archives, the Mexican norms are for smaller archives. What I mean with smaller archives, it can be like up to 5,000 images. And we could say those like first years of our archive work. But nowadays, we're almost at 29,000 images. So we had to transition to the international norms and actually wearing with Acto, with Unchained, so we can be up to pair with other archives that and also professionalizing this process of archive and for us to reach that level.
Thank you to International Trans Foundation that we've been able to have our physical space, thanks to them, with all the areas that archives require, the cleaning, the conservation, the organization, the physical space, this deposit, the humidity control and the material protection. Because part of the archival is also how to take care of the material. So there's It's the history of the trans community in Argentina. We started in 2012, and we started to do this work, and it was very connected with different folks from all around Latin America who identify as trans, and we were able to complete this process, and we have documented around 29 LGBT or trans archives, and we started to do the queer archives, the trans archives. There are actually some, for example, in Colombia, Mexico, Chile, we use the same name, but it's not the same organization. They are, we have like La Memoria in Colombia, La Memoria in Chile, and they would post it and they would never um share from where this was coming from. So we even asked for them to use their country names. It's fine if they use the same name, but just so that there aren't confusions, it's best to have, different names so they can be differentiated with the archives and the files. And I also wanted to share that we've been very recognized on international level and in Argentina. And in Argentina, we consider ourselves a group of just queer people together, and abroad in London or in Barcelona or Madrid. Those were some of the first places that we were able to have our, exposition, and that was after, and we were being more recognized within Argentina, and that definitely helped with the women who were working on the archives. So these were the women that started to, build these archives together, and they've organized visits to get to know our work and be considered as peers or as colleagues in the archives. And I can stop there so we can have some space for questions at the end if that works for you all. And this was a presentation about the work that we've been doing around archives. And thank you for the translator. Yeah, we can also ask any questions if folks have any questions. This video is 20 minutes long, so you can watch it again at a different time. But if there are any questions, yeah, please let me know. Yeah, I had a question too. Sometimes I kind of get into monologue space and I miss some things, but questions definitely help.
I have some questions here
Yes,
that I
please
would
ask
like
your
to add.
question. Yes, my question is, whenever you were talking about other archives being born or created in other countries, did these have the same quality of the Argentina archive that was created by the trans women? There are some other archives that would be, historians or archivists. Yeah, the majority of the archives that I'm talking about, these 29, are uh, trans people that have started to bring their material together. And throughout time, they started to integrate into the archival work. 2 years ago, we hosted our first gathering of trans archives in Latin America, and we were able to do a level of, training about these archives. And, we were called to them on the individual level, but we realized that there was a need, and that's when we created a gathering and we talked about the archives in Latin America and LGBTQ archives, and there's one in London and in another place. And last year we did a training clinic. And it's hard to say if they're at the same level because, the starting point is different. We started a long time ago, so we have, moved forward for sure. All the archives started, with a borrowed computer or a scanner, meeting at someone's house. For the first 5 years, we were, in someone's house, in someone's living room. And International Trans Foundation, we've had an office for 5 years and work Monday through Friday. Before, we would just do one day, we were just using our own resources. We had 1 hour together that we were donating to work on the different pieces. We hosted events to, buy gloves, or like for dusters. And now we have all the equipment. And we've had different, expos, or we want to, when we talk about the expositions, we're talking about the video, the pictures, you know, seeing the full expansiveness of the work. And that's something that we've been able to do throughout the years. And it's been a few, years since we haven't hosted an event because it, costs. And something else that we wanted to say is that we have 5 trans folks who are working with us, and we talked about digital literacy, right? We work with elders as well. We work with youth who do know how to use computers and scanners, but they don't know the story behind the picture. And whenever I'm working with older adults, they're able to tell me who the people are in the pictures. They aren't just able to clean it and digitize it. They're able to add the information. And if they don't have the information, they can find out. If they're 50, 60 years old, we have women who are working with us who are like 79 years old. So we go through all of these, and we work with youth, and we also do things a little bit differently as compared to other archivists because they start to work with youth, but we work with the elders, with the trans women, so that they can participate, so that we can understand what it takes to have a trans family, and they can have their wisdom and their protection and what is needed to conserve and protect that image and that photo.
I have several questions in the chat. Thank you, Maria. I'm going to read some here or here. Two or four. The two are related. So we're going to start with if you have more obstacles you're in Malay. Do you have any memories, especially you're still working on anything exciting right now that you're working on?
And that was a question for me,
Same,
right?
same.
Yes. We are always, we always have a lot of things that come up with the images because they're images around your family, and we ask people to think about family, whether this be a parent, an aunt, or a grandmother that keeps the pictures. So whenever that family member gathers the pictures, they do this with love and they do this with, the intention or the feeling of putting all the pieces together of the puzzle that form family. So just how we're doing, we're doing the same thing. We're reclaiming, we're gathering um old pictures of people who have passed, and if it wasn't for us, nobody would know the name of the person in the picture. So we're always, have feelings come up. So that's why we wanted to hire older girls because they're the ones that bring the feelings, the thoughts, and the first work around archives was to know that we were alive, to know where we were all at, because before 2012 and the gender, a lot of people, hid inside the country and a lot of people fled. So in 2012 was the task that we had at hand is just knowing where we were all at and hosting meetings. So from 2012, 2015, people didn't know about the archives. It was an internal movement that we knew about, but not anybody else. There was folks who wanted to work around the trans femicides and, violence against trans women and people. And as that was happening, they gathered their materials and, this happened for about a year and we were convincing people like, oh, these pictures need to come out. And we were moving along. We were sharing the images and pictures amongst ourselves. We knew where each and one of us was. And that was, the objective of the archive. And then we started to open it up more. And then we launched it in 2016. And in 2017, we had an expo in this eczema. And we were also talking about trans archive, but in 2017, that's when that happened. But we've been doing that since 2012, 2002. And like I was mentioning, these are family photos, very sacred photos of my family, my friends, my sisters. And there was a level of privacy that we had to, go through this filter through and be able to understand that the work that we were doing was really important. This gathering of data. And it didn't just have to sit within our circle, our inner circle. It had to come out so that we could, you know, really say what was going on during this time. And because if you searched up transvesti, you would get the pictures of the press and anything else except a trans person. So when you type in travesti Argentina, now what you see is the pictures of our archive. So we were able to kind of break this image of the sexualization of the photographer or the journalist, and we started to put in the pictures that we have taken ourselves. And that's where we can move from art. Like, these are the pictures. What was behind the picture? What was the heart of it? Instead of the morbid, we are looking at this with joy and kindness. And I think that that's the reason behind these pictures. And the great thing is that these pictures are taken by us, and we are the conservationists, we are the artists, we are the photographers. So there were many, things that we were not getting because of our age. We talk about our youth, we talk about our our time, and sometimes being 50 years old, there weren't opportunities to talk about trans youth experiences or trans school experiences and going into a professional future as well.
We have some questions just before we start the workshop, but we still have a second part on this program. So I'm going to open to Anna. Everybody wants to say something and how to we work and edit and Wikidata. So it would be this idea of review the articles and rethink of our participation. So Flavia, you would like to read some questions to Anna or Anna?
I saw a question in the chat about the obstacles that we have in Argentina since Javier Milei. And yeah, I would like to highlight that the obstacles are each day worse because of all the economic crisis and all that the government is taking affects women and the dissidents. And yeah, we can see it, and it makes it impossible to not talk about other things sometimes because you have to be thinking if you're doing okay, how to help your friends and other people who are, and maybe something you could do 6 years ago or 4 years ago, you can't do no more. So yeah, we have to be talking a lot about.
I'm going to take your question. One issue is that we're talking about here in Art Feminism in the place of representation, of making international internet more feminist and stream the gap, social trans, non-binary, queers, racialized. We talk about work that goes against this demonic system that we live in. There's a work, we face a lot of challenges, especially for people like that start with additions. So every work that we show here today, especially in activism, education, arts, they're work that is against the current. Like you mentioned, sometimes it shocked with the political scenario and that we're facing right now, especially in Argentina, in a more positive way. By I think our objective here is to make community. So we could work in pairs. I would like to ask. It could be to the three of you or someone who got something in mind that you give a advice to us on how to continue to do this work, a work that has a great impact, social, activist impact at this moment in which we're living in right now. Things that are so difficult around the world.
I don't know, Maria, if you want to answer. Well, when a couple years ago we had this situation of the extreme right to win in Argentina, what we first did was call our friends in Brazil and ask them what they did during Bolsonaro. And the first thing they told us is to break the algorithm because the most we mention the most it will be part of it. That's how if we talk good things or bad things, that was their strategy they deployed, referring to that person but never by their name. So we start breaking with that algorithm, coming together, community. That is the recipe. That's a historical recipe throughout history. That has been the way to survive, being in community, being together, coming together, supporting each other, finding sorority. That is what can allow us to survive in these situations because things pass. The right never goes fully away. It's a little sleepy, and it's a bad moment that they're awake, and it generates this monster, as there was a wave of women coming together at some point and fighting to have free and legal abortions, for example. And I think for us within the dissidencies, coming together with what are the minorities so we don't start and continue disappearing. There aren't a lot of recommendations. I don't think there's a specific recipe. And that old recipe of being in communities, what?
I would like to call Anna to this talk. And talking about the time of the institution, Anna, you're talking a lot about the period in which you start working. You start with your proposal until it was accepted. It was very beautiful. The certain moment that you said that it was a moment that the institution was ready. But I would like also to share with us a little bit this difficulty, not as a difficulty, no, not, but like we could talk as pairs, this strategy. How do you, like you swim it against the right wing current? There's there's so many ways to answer this question. I have in my mind that there are several ways to fight a war. There are people, there are groups that goes to guns, weapons. There are groups that goes to right. There are groups that go talk, that goes to organize collectively, go to the streets. I chose this way of fighting this war that we're fighting. I think it's what I know what to do, and that's the way I can fight. And as a warrior, going after this, never given quick answers to complex questions. Issues like this one that we're like approaching, and we need time for them to move, and we have to deal with our incapacity to solve them in a short time, especially historically. So we should be able to keep doing what we can do. I think you have to have a trust, incredible trust in yourself, in your community. It's so needed. The chance of we give up and forget to tell our story, don't say anything about our history. It's so real. We're always looking for our point of view, our force that we want to move forward. There are a lot of things out there that try to unmotivated us. Silence, it's a powerful weapon within this process. We're all the time talking about, and all the time we're discussing, trying to be seen, mean as a trans, racialized. Sometimes I want to disappear. I want to be silenced. I want to be out of the blue. I try to get out of my house, and the people are looking at me, staring at me. I walk on the street, and people are like, keep observing me. I have my right to walk, to my daily life, to live my anonymous life, the silence. Ooh, no, I need the tenderness of life. You know, all of us, they're not. No, we're not the ones there on the top of the war. I would like to remind us that when was easy for us? When? When was calm? We had some moments that we could breathe, but those moments were insufficient. We're still dying. Brazil today, again, wow, we had feminicides coming up so high. It was never different. That's the reality. We have to deal with the fact that we never were safe. Our history was never told. We always work with precarious situations. And even though we're still here, because there's a legion of people organizing strategically, politically, intellectually, so we could speak today, so we could talk today. We have to the movement, black movement, feminist, all those movements, anti-racist fight. We have to the Colombo, all the Afro religions, all the fights there were built in order for us to take care of this. We were part of this movement. That's I think it's this is the way. This is a very complete question. Thank you so much for this. I don't want to take more time, but remind me last year I had the opportunity to visit. I had the lesbian article in Berlin that it happened since 1970, and with the change of the government, I did the same question to the manager of that archive, and she gave me the same answer. She said, "Never was easy. We are here in a logic of precariousness. We always have been here in this resistance space and created our own internal political logic. It's just one more thing that is gonna pass through us, and we have to deal with it." Thank you so much. Do you want to say something?
I agree with everything that Maria Belén and Ana shared. And if the community, if searching for those connections is the key of a constant struggle, but I do think that there are some particular points in this situation with late stage capitalism that are confronting us to new stages for everyone. And I do think the possibility of reimagining or imagining new ways to exist and live, that is our refuge. That's it.
Hi, Adi. Thank you so much. We're a little bit worried with the time. I'm gonna call Mika. Mika, you have any questions before we go to the workshop? Any questions you want to add? I thank you so much, Erna Adi. Be with us in this afternoon. I have a lot of questions. There's a lot of things to talk, especially at this last point that Ed just touched. In this moment that we're here, there are other tools of oppression. And how Anna said, Maria brought this several times, how this idea of community and meeting popular organizations in meetings like this, they're technologies of being together, basically, to face the world as the world it is right now, or the world has been. And I had Anna also mention on this. Now I'm gonna pass the word to Vicky. Thank you so much. Yes, Vicky. I invite everybody to continue with us in the Zoom for the workshop. And Vic, I call you at this moment, and I thank you so much.
I'm going to speak in Spanish, so I'm going to give everyone a moment to get into their interpretation channel. Thank you so much to the panelists. The bar is so high. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Wikidata and through the organizations that we work through around the universities and the voices on the internet. We think it's really important to connect the experiences that you all bring to this panel with our universe. We have experience in previous collaboration, I'm sure, and it's always been great collaborating with everyone. And definitely the visibility of the images, the pictures on the internet to show up on the search results. We want these to be able to create space for other conversations and connections. So I'm going to talk briefly about Wikidata. So Wikidata is the database that we work in the wiki world, and a panel around art. We're able to see the connections through these. I will have my presentation and then I'm going to pass it over to Freddie, and then we will have a space for any questions. And I know that we're over time, so I will shorten the presentation. This is a brief description of the wiki data and how they define and refer to themselves. So this was made by Wikipedia editors, and I'm going to talk about it more in the future slides, but this is a base of knowledge that is collective, and it's a collection of many volunteer editors. This is a way that is basically the base of the wiki projects. And creating this final product in multiple languages and different perspectives allows us to move through this database. It's a secondary database. So this feeds the Wikimedia projects, but it also exchanges information with other databases and other search engines and AI search. And next slide. Wikidata has some control preferences and settings so that we can understand how they're connected with other databases. They connect with the descriptors and the identifiers and the information within the database. Next slide. So you can understand the importance of this database. I wanted to bring you this image and show you how this information is connected. The majority of people who access Wiki, they go through Wikipedia. They it takes a minute to know that there are different projects And when you get to this, there's a piece that's called Control de Autoridades, and this is where all the the settings and the identifiers are located. So basically what it does is it connects the geographies with other identifiers or tags under which these are registered. So we also have to see authority control. Exactly. We need to see the connection of Wikipedia, Wikidata, and Wikimedia Commons. These are created to have the open access data for the users. Next slide. I also wanted to share, and we're gonna break this down, but Wikidata, talking about a database, we have different information that structures the knowledge. So these structured um, pieces are good for humans and for machines. So this is kind of like the base. We as humans can contribute and edit, and we are also in dialogue with all these machines that are also building the internet with us. So I was also recently reading that in the last few years, 50% of the content on the internet belongs to machines or is created by machines. So we are also, fighting against this and also in collaboration connection. So we have the different tags, the description. I use Gabriela Mistral as an example. This could be the element. Their tag is the brief description, who they are, poet, diplomatic professor, Chilena, and the other names that she's known of, for example, her legal name. Then we also have the statements that are connected to the properties and the values. So, for example, Gabriela Mistral is a human being that in the code, in the language, they would be Q80871. This is a P31 and a QS. This sounds strange, but as we keep going, you'll understand it a little bit better. Next slide. So here's more information or another screenshot of what I was just mentioning. So this is all the information that we have around Gabriela Mis. And now that we have this code, this allows other searchers. And right now we have a big issue with the AI machines because they do saturate the search engine, but we are creating this structured information, we are connecting it to references and sources, and this is our way in the door in a more simple way to Wikimedia projects. Wikipedia and Wikidata is going to allow us to do a first search of the relevant information of a particular person. Next slide. So Wikidata allows us to have this in exchange of data. I put it here in the visual. We have the authority controls and the authors when there's anything that changes in the database. This also can help us better our information and our identifiers. Next slide. Here you can see Gabriela Mistral, these are the identifiers that I set as an example for the presentation. So these are connectors to the other databases so that we are pulling that information off the internet. Next slide. And to close, and before I go into the more practical piece, I wanted to share that Wikidata on September 25th, 2025, Wikidata was declared the good public digital through the DPG Alliance. So what did this means? Next slide. What does this mean? This means that we are recognized as a project, as something that is being handled and edited by their community and built and serves as a base for other Wikimedia projects. And that's not the only reason. that we're being recognized. It's also because we are upholding, as a database, a lot of information for other things. We've been able to collaborate and be a part of many different projects and areas. So all the things that we are able to make better in Wikidata will have way to become information that doesn't just live on Wikidata. It's going to be shared in the search engines, in the AI platforms, and it will provide access to that information in that way. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of Wikidata, and I'm going to pass the word over to Fred. And thank you, Kira. Thank you so much, Vic, and thank you, everybody. I'm going to share my screen to share a little bit about the workshop. This is going to be shortened based on the time that we have available. And please let me know if I'm speaking way too fast because I do tend to do that, especially when we have translators. I definitely speak a lot more than faster than what I need to. So Vic was telling us about the importance of Wikidata and connecting the different data and through all the search engines and the AI platforms and the internet and how these are connected to the Wikipedia projects. So how can we start to create or make this information better? So if we have a Wikipedia page, we automatically have a Wikidata page because these are shared pages or accounts. So how can we get to the different tags or areas? We have a few different options. We can go directly through wikidata.org, or we can do it directly in the Wikipedia articles. We also have some templates that allow us to access these Wikidata information and access them. So for example, to show you how to get in, for example, I have this article of Gabriela Cabezon Cámara, LGBTQ author from Argentina, and you're always going to see a button that says tools or herramientas, and there's always going to be that option at the end that's called Elemento Wikidata. Wikidata element. And this can be in any article. We can go to the tools element, and then automatically it will open up the page itself, and we can see a little bit more about what Beek was saying. We'll have the part up at the top, the tag, the description, and this element, and we're able to see, the statements that are there. So for example, we have a similar structure that we will always have a property and the value. So talking about Gabriela Cabezon Cámara, the first statement is going to be, the instance of what is this referring to? It's referring to a human. And there is a statement, we have an image. We can bring an image directly from Commons. We don't might not have to do anything in particular. We just look for the file name or the archive name, and then we'll have that. We'll have another statement about sex and gender, country of origin. We'll have different statements. So once we create a new tag or field, we need to see what these are the indicators. So what are the information that we have to put in? We can see the properties and we just start to add them. Talking a little bit about the statements, right? And talking about how they divide themselves. And it might be a little confusing, but it's very organized. And we have, okay, the label that is going to be at the top of the page always, and we'll have the property. And I mentioned that they're always going to be on the left. So this statement is about, the awards that this person has received. It'll be there. Then it'll have the value, which is the awards or HANA, and then we'll have the qualifiers. This allows us to provide information about the property that we're adding. So we added that this person won this award, and then the indicator could be what year or for what literally novel did they have this award be given for. And so these are the references as well, and Sometimes we have statements that you don't add references, but it's always good to add a reference. So let's create one in particular. So what if it's a artist woman? I'm gonna take the example of, in our Wikipedia page in Spanish, we have a lot of articles that we still need to go through, and I've been looking through articles that we've identified. I saw an Ecuadorian writer, and she actually put a article here, and they don't have a Wikipedia page, they don't have a Wikidata page. So the first thing that we would do is create the ficha. And in Wikipedia in Espanol, when you create an article, the template itself of a person allows you to create this for somebody else. In English, I believe that doesn't occur. But in the Spanish example, let's say that you're creating an article, and one of the first things that you're doing is create the template for a person in Spanish. And so you're going to add the different properties. And I'm just using this as an example right now. But as you can see, like we can have it tells us that the page is not linked to Wikipedia. And it tells us the page is not linked on Wikipedia. There's two options. If you could create the item, and if it already exists, you can just link it. But because it doesn't exist yet, we would have to create it. So that's whenever you're creating that, it would prompt you to do this piece. So I'm gonna put it here in Spanish. So if you click automatically, it'll already take you. If you're on the left side, there's a button that's create new element that's going to bring you to that same page. So we first have the language, which is Spanish. We have the the label, we have the element, and the description. And since we're working in Spanish, I'm gonna just write in Spanish, Ecuadorian, writer, and I'm not gonna add anything there yet. Okay, I think the issue is because I haven't created the article. I'm going to create a new element.
Ecuatoriano. So simply with that, we've created the article. It has a Spanish tag and a description. Now you can also add descriptions in other languages. For example, I'm going to add it in English really quick. And you can add more labels based on the language. It's going to be really interesting to have one tag that is for all the different languages. And when we talk about biographies, it's really important because the name is usually not translated. So we can usually just add the tag over here and it's going to be a part of all the languages. Here we have the basic part and we are going to add some declarations. It's really important to say what this is about. This is a biography, but we need to add that as well. For declarations, we have to go to the declaration and it's going to give us the options. Since it's a biography, it's going to be human being. And we save that and we now have the first declaration. Based on the article, we're going to have different ones that are added. Now I'm going to add some different ones. Gender, sex, feminine, and we can add others. And the moment that we add this this declarations, Wikidata is going to give us different options, the most common ones that you add to this kind. For example, if I would have said book, which I'm going to do, I'm going to be suggested different entries, but we can add whatever. So in that case, could you go a little slower, please? Yes. Yes. As I was saying, Every time I add a category, it's going to give me options that are usually under human being. Name, first name, Daria, in this case. And we can start adding different categories or declarations. I wanted to show you how to add references, which is really important when we talk about the date of birth or place of birth. It adds it as a recommendation to add in a biography. So I add date of birth, and I already had a reference from a newspaper in Ecuador. And it tells me that she was born in Quito, 1995. So I'm going to add this reference that I had searched for. I'm going to add 1995, ready, and then I can say add reference. And here you can add different things. For example, you can add the URL for where the reference is. It tells me website, and you can add it, paste it there. And this can be enough as a reference, but we can be more specific. We have the URL, but we also have, oh, I don't know if it's gonna, I usually do these in English. This one for a reference, it can say it is written in the reference. In this case, it's the newspaper La Hora in Ecuador. And you can add the date and even more things, but for now, I'm just gonna leave it there. We'll save that, and now we have the year, a reference. That it should be a little different. Maybe this can be a website. It doesn't let me add it, but we can even just leave the link, and since I usually do it in English, oh, we can add maybe the place of birth. We can save that. In this case, the place of birth. If we found it, we can add the place, and we can add the reference that we previously added. Something important is these qualifications that allow for more precise information in a declaration. For example, we have a person, an artist from the 19th century, and there's differences in the references. It can be like we don't know exactly when they were born, and you can add some differentiations or exact things. In this case, we do know that they were born in 1995, but we could add a qualitative or add here circumstances of the reference to say that that date is not exact, or we don't know exactly, and we don't know exactly if it was for that year. But I'm gonna take it away because we do know. So these allow us to add more precision and details to any kind of declaration that we add for a biography. As we can see, this is already, it has basic information, but we've added a lot of information. If we would create this Wikipedia article about this writer, this would be filled up with all this data. We would see their writer, their name, their nationality, place of birth, and it also depends on each Wikipedia. There's some Wikipedia that don't like add other Wikidata information, but most do. For example, the one in Spanish. We were looking at the article for Gabriela Cabezón Cámara. All this information on the right is not written in Wikipedia. A person added with no data. Even the image was imported from Wikidata automatically, which reduces the time that we need to do. And if we're translating articles, it's amazing because we have the basic information with no problem. That's a goal. That's like the basic thing. But another thing that Vic mentioned is those identifications that connect the references of outside knowledge to this person. We can add to one of those here as an example. We can identify different libraries or national databases. I know one that's really simple. It's called Goodreads. And we consider that an identifiable. I would like to add that to this person. First, I'll search. We can see them. There's going to be an ID, and this depends on each source of knowledge or information is going to have their different kind of ID. I added Goodreads, identifiable number per author. I shared it, and if I re-download, it's going to be separate to the rest. And if you add more, you can see them. So at the moment where the article is created in Wikipedia, it's going to be in the bottom part in the authority control with the rest of the identifiable numbers of the person, and it's going to be automatic. This is an example for a biography, but when we're talking about specifically in this case, artists, LGBT artists, I personally think it's really important to talk about their pieces. Because sometimes, I don't know if it's a problem or like a lack where we have a lot of biographies, but sometimes we talk about what's most important. We lack talking about what's most important, their pieces. So I would say adding those, because if we don't create it ourselves, no one else is going to create them. Heterosexual men from the North have articles for each of their pieces, and I think there's a lack of creating the articles for the pieces of LGBT. And I'm going to do it really quick, but in this article, they talk about the author's most important book. To create it really quick, I go to add a new element. In the tag, I'm going to put the name of the book that I added from the reference. I'm going to say book by and the author's name, and then I add create. In declarations, I have to say, what does this talk about? So in this case, is a literary piece instead of a human being. And now something interesting is to connect one to the other. As we know that this piece, this book is connected to the author, we can connect it as author. As I added literary piece in the top part, it gives me options of what is usually chosen. In this case, I'm going to write author. I add the name, and now in the bottom part, I have the article that I had created, so I can select that and save that. The publishing date is, for example, an easy example. And we also have, it's pretty small, we can add much more. It's a basic one for one of her example books. And as I connected the author, in this case, I can do it on the other hand. And the article for the author, I can connect it with the book that I just created if it's one of the most important ones. There is a category that says kind of highlighted piece, and you can do it for any artist. If we have an artist, a painter, we can add some of their most important pieces. If it's a writer, it can be her music, etc. We can add that there, and then we publish. And in this moment, I have connected the biography to the piece and the piece to the biography. Again, once the article is created in Wikipedia, automatically the piece is going to be as one of the most important pieces. So this is very basic. As I said, we don't have that much time. I don't know if anyone has any questions up to now from creating and editing these articles, just like we add the declarations. If you see one that already exists, something really helpful is to add references and add the needed information. If there's no questions, you can always interrupt me, but we can continue. Something that I've noticed and that I think is really important is indicating within the properties if the person, for example, because we have so many biographies of LGBTQ people, but in Wikidata, there's no information that allows us to identify them. And this is a problem because we're saying that Wikidata can be used in different languages to create, for example, list of articles that are missing information. In Spanish, I showed you some of these lists, but we have many lists that are created automatically by Wikidata. And if we say, can you mention the LGBT people that don't have their article published? But that depends if someone has added that information in their Wikidata article. Because the example that we have of Gabriela Cabezón Cámara, if we see her article, how she has talked about openly about her sexual orientation, this is an important part of her narrative. There's a category here that says sexual orientation, it says lesbian, and there's references added there, and there's like different values for gender identity, but we can of course add those to Wikidata, which I think is very important. Whenever we work with these declarations, it's important to add a reference. It's like a small rule within Wikidata to be able to model different LGBT data. So to show an example of how we use these declarations or articles in Wikipedia in Spanish, we can show these lists that are created automatically. Give me a second. For example, we have these lists created per country. Now we want to create for each country. And for each country, for example, here we have Germany, LGBT people and activists, and there's a huge list of people who don't have their article in Spanish, but none of us wrote this. It was imported from Wikidata as a query, which is the last thing that I'm going to show you. But if we create new articles for LGBTQ people, these will automatically be added to the list. So we have a little bit of information on how to create the statements, how to edit them, how to add information. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, we're 5 minutes from closing the entire session.
The last piece that I'll share is about these queries in particular that we've created. So well, I won't do it I'll just do one example due to time and then we'll go from there. So if you go to Wikidata on the left side, remember we had the create new element button, but we'll also have an option that is called Servicio de Consultas in Spanish, or Service of Consult. So if you go here to the queries, and just one second, might be here. I believe it's this one. There's a way that is a lot easier than what usually happens. Okay, here we are. So again, sorry for that. But if you're in Wikidata, you'll go to Servicio de Consultas. There'll be a button that is called the Query Builder. So you would go in the Wikidata Query Builder, um, and then that will pull it up. So this allows you to search based on what we've already searched before. So we're talking about artists. And we're talking about Argentina. We can find the Argentinian lesbians artists in the artist field. So we want to indicate that we want to search for people. So in the instance of human, we want the value to be human. So pull up all the elements that are human. What else can I put? I could do the condition, the country of citizenship, and it will be Argentina. So I want you to name all the elements that of the people that are from Argentina, and their occupation is artist. And the sexual orientation in this particular case, you do lesbianism, but you can search for others. But it's very basic again, and we search for all the elements that, you know, instance of human, property, country of citizenship, matching Argentina, occupation, matching artist, sexual orientation, lesbian. And then we can do the different pieces. And so the articles, and we have them here. For people who speak Spanish, we know that there are many more articles of lesbian artists in Argentina. And Argentina indicates that these hasn't, updated him. So for people who have translated articles in Spanish, we know that there are a lot of articles that wouldn't even pull up. But this tool is very powerful, very important. You can search up anything around any country, any profession, any identity, whether they were born in this year, that year. It will give you a very versatile way to search. And you can also copy the link. You can copy the link to query, and then you can copy that there. And the last piece, something that I have already built out, and we have here Wikidata, we've created maps. All this information is exclusively from Wikidata, and this is a map of the world where we have seen all the prides and all of the Wikidata information. So this is for us to see where the gap contents exist, and we know that there are many different ways we can find for a different article and then map it and see where there are more. Because we can see that there are a lot more elements and around pride marches. And this used to be worse, before we used to see this. We did this in all of Latin America. Um, but before we didn't have much. And we see that in Asia, there's hasn't been a lot of elements created around marches, and this is created 100% Wikidata and the query, and you start to realize how to build it, but it's very powerful. And we have something else here that talks about the monuments or the memorial sites for LGBTQ people, and we can see that we have less, and then most of them have also been created in Europe or in the US. We have a few in Latin America that we've been working with, but this also, lets us know the huge gap that we have. And so that's a little bit. And the last one was about the biography. So this one's a little bit more complex. And we use this to find the articles in the Wikipedia pages. So we have some in Germany, and we don't have time to go step by step through this, but it does show us that there is an article of LGBTQ people in Germany that don't have the article. And we can search in any country. This is also very helpful for closing the gender gap. But that's a little bit about wanted to share, and it was a very quick summary about how to create this, how to edit them, and what we can do and use for this information as we're creating more content. And I don't know if there's any questions. Thank you for that presentation, for that journey. We have a couple of brief minutes if there are any questions. And I also shared in the chat the chat where we are able to, share and contribute to the projects. I'm also going to write down my email if you want to edit and you want to find out and remember how it's done. It's there. And we're also going to share the registration form and the information to everyone who has registered. And I just want to thank all the panelists that you see here who have shared their experience in a way that is so inspiring. And I really want to thank the Art and Feminism crew, Flavia, and everyone else who has been here with us and has stuck with us, even though we know that this is a hard piece to hold. And we will see you in the other activities, in the chats, in the platforms, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.